IVM. This episode may contain spoilers. You have been warned. Hello and welcome. You're listening to a brand new podcast episode of Mr. and Mrs. Binge-Watch. It's very sunny here in the studios today, which is why I've decided to wear my sunglasses and do this entire recording. You'll also be hearing some strange sounds on today's episodes, like the sound of Ani slurping his coffee. Slurp, Ani, slurp some more.
What is...
And
listen,
me
what we
chewing
don't...
my gum.
Yes, we don't want to hear you chewing your gum, please. Can you do something about that, Janice?
I will do a poll.
This is a professional podcast. Please spit it out.
I will do a poll. If any of you guys can hear me chew my gum, I will resign from this podcast.
We will lose listeners, Janice. Do you know how many millions of listeners do we have? We'll lose at least a couple thousand.
Couple thousand in comparison
like
to
couple of 10,000s.
Do you mean the couple of thousand who are listening in already?
You think a couple of thousands are listening in? Man, you're ambitious. Okay, can you please get on with the show? Enough of stand-up now. Chalo.
Okay, so on today's episode, what are we doing? Honey?
So we are talking about Jenji Kohan today, and there's a reason why we are doing that. The new season of Glow has just dropped. Jenji Kohan is the executive producer on that show. In fact, she has this deal with Netflix under which she has to make a bunch of shows, and Glow is one of them, and the new season is absolutely kick-ass. But the real reason we're going to be talking about Jenji Kohan is because the final season of Orange is the New Black landed a couple of weeks ago, and what a fucking season that was. That was obviously a show that Jenji Kohan created 7 years ago. She also executive produces that. Easily one of the modern classics, which went off on a high, and so Janice and I am going to be talking about both the new seasons of Orange is the New Black and Glow. So Little Boxes was the opening theme of Weeds, which was a show that Jenji Kohan created almost 10-15 years ago. It was among the first few shows from Showtime that I had watched. I think it came out around the same time as when Californication and Dexter were playing. And I remember downloading all the episodes of Weeds and watching them at that time and discovering this really quirky, weird show about a suburban widow played by the super enchanting Mary Louise Parker, who, after loses her husband and needs to bring her 2 kids up, essentially takes to selling marijuana in the neighborhood. And it was this crazy, wacky idea, and it was made up of this ragtag of characters. So there was also the character of her brother-in-law Andy, which was played by Justin Kirk, who's now gone on to do much bigger and better work.
Sure.
And yeah, it was this really simple idea which went kind of crazy, I felt, and at least the first 3-4 seasons of the show were extremely binge-worthy. And then it became one of those shows that I was watching just because I so loved the characters. As a loyalist, because the show kind of kept on dipping season after season. I remember there was this amazing arc where she falls in love with a Colombian gangster, I think, which was played by Damien Bichir, this amazing actor who was in a film that I saw at Mami a few years ago. But essentially till about the 5th or 6th season, the show, kept on kicking ass. And so when Orange is the New Black came out in 2013, and, I knew of the show as it being from the creator of Weeds, I didn't really know what to expect, because tonally Weeds was such a different show from what Orange is the New Black eventually turned out to be, right? You remember our first take on Orange is the New Black when it came out?
I do remember sort of because it was, I think, among the first few shows that Netflix also commissioned. And also it was one of the first few shows that we had also ever watched, which had just been released all episodes at the same time, right? So it was a new experience, both in the sense that we were watching a story about this ensemble cast in a prison. And on top of that, we were watching all episodes together. So for us, in terms of viewing, it was also a new experience, because it wasn't one of those downloaded episodes and then we're getting to binge watch all at one go, right? We're actually getting to legally binge watch all episodes at one go.
Yeah.
But now that you talk about Weeds and Showtime, and what a great run that show had on Showtime, Jenji Kohan talks very openly in a lot of interviews about how she was super pissed off about the fact that Orange is the New Black was not picked up by Showtime. It was originally planned and written for Showtime, and then of course in the meanwhile, because Showtime wouldn't say yes, she went and pitched it to Netflix, who then, without even seeing a pilot, basically commissioned the entire series.
No, but I wouldn't be too surprised, given the kind of show that Weeds was. I would not expect Jenji Kohan to have... So Weeds, at the end of the day, was a very interesting watch.
She calls it Breaking Bad before Breaking Bad.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't go that far.
Okay, I've not watched Weeds.
But I think she's coming from the fact that a regular person starts selling drugs to sort of, support his or her family. But I'm saying that Orange is the New Black as a pitch is essentially Prison Break, not Prison Break really, but more like Oz with female characters in it. And it's a tough pitch, right? Because, in fact, I read this other interview that she did right after the finale aired, where she said that even though she eventually wanted to tell the story of the African American and Hispanic characters in the show as she does so beautifully, and we'll talk about that, it was always going to be a tough sell for her to have an African American protagonist, because studios would not necessarily greenlight a show like that back in 2013. They'd probably do that now. So she used the character of Piper, which is played by Taylor Schilling, to sort of be the protagonist, who's this privileged white woman who gets arrested and then sent behind bars. And she uses the white woman's take to then tell greater stories. But until you got into the first 2 seasons of the show, it was impossible to tell where she was going with it. So it's not very unlikely to think that a Showtime would turn that, a series like that down, because at the end of the day, the pitch itself at a very plot level, it sounds like an extremely sort of crazy idea, right? But of course, not anymore. But I'm saying at that point it would have.
Sure. What's also very interesting for me about Jenji herself is that before she became the showrunner on Weeds and sort of, started, work on OITNB and Glow and all of the other amazing shows that she sort of produced and backed, she had a writing spot on almost every one of our favorite sitcom-y shows.
Correct.
So she was on the original writing team for Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Yeah.
She was fired after the first season of writing for Friends. In fact, if you remember Joey posing for those STD ads, that was her one big contribution to season 1. She also wrote for, Sex and the City.
She also wrote Mad About You, I think, which is huge.
Mad About You. She also wrote for Gilmore Girls.
Yeah.
So she has written all of these very light, almost sort of fluffy in a sense shows, and then she comes out with Weeds, which of course now, given the amount of times you've recommended it, I just need to get around to watching it. And
I don't know if you'd like it now. I'm saying Weeds...
You're saying it hasn't aged well.
No, I don't know that. I'm saying that when I discovered Weeds, it was a cool show to watch at that point of time, because there wasn't this explosion of great TV shows that we're watching now. And in terms of... So it's interesting because in all 3 shows that we are talking about today, there is this very clear sort of female gaze, right? Your protagonist is a woman doing what's most important is that it's not about just a woman in the protagonist's place. It's a woman doing things that you don't associate with women. That's what makes it interesting. When you think of a prison show, you think of it being men. When you think of a show like Glow, which is about wrestlers, and then you make it about female wrestlers, and it just becomes such a great freaking idea. Similarly,
it's like what we talked about, remember, when we discussed Killing Eve. We said the fact that what makes Killing Eve so fascinating
is that Phoebe Waller-Bridge,
it could have been Sandra Oh and Jodie Comer could have been played by men, and they aren't.
It's taking a concept that is historically been played by men and then casting women in them.
And it goes beyond that also, right? Because Jenji Kohan, she's sort of taken the idea of these massive female ensemble casts, set them in very interesting all kinds of universes, from a wrestling acting gig to a prison scenario to a housewife scenario. And yet every one of the shows, I feel like the similarity is that race, the cultures they come from, the backgrounds that they represent, and the unlikely friendships that these women form. Because
even Weeds, now that I think of it, had Mexican American characters, even though it was really about a white neighborhood. So you're right, it was like subconsciously it started seeping its way through which was a predominantly white show.
And also remember when Weeds was being made, how many studios or networks would be like, yeah man, we're okay with predominantly female casts, only women.
No, but at that time it was very common.
Unless it's a Sex and the City kind of. I'm talking about when you're dealing with really serious, hardcore, gritty themes.
No, I would think that actually selling a show about a housewife who takes to selling marijuana would have not been that tough a sell, because at the end of the day she's playing a suburban woman. So it's really a spin on the whole suburban woman trope that we saw in a lot of American shows at that point of
like
time.
Like Desperate Housewives.
Like several. I mean, just like there is no end to the number of shows that were coming out at that point of time. But what's really, really cool about her shows is, like we discussed, I think what you said earlier about the fact that she wrote a lot about a lot of those light shows or funny shows. I think that you can see in her work. In fact, even in Orange is the New Black, even though she's dealing with more serious themes, and we need to understand this, Janice, that a lot of that tone comes over a period of time.
Of course.
It's not just one person, it's her writer's room. It's about how they are, it's about how they are jamming together, what kind of places the writers want to take the story.
It's also our own evolution as human beings,
yeah,
right?
So while Orange is the New Black does take on slightly deeper themes, when it first came out, you could slot it broadly under some sort of a comedy sort of a space, right? I mean, it wasn't strictly comedy, but it wasn't drama either.
Yeah, but I think post season 2, it really has sort of become more and more just a drama with sometimes a light-hearted...
I think it was always a drama, but like you said, with a light-hearted touch. That light-heartedness sort of went up and down depending on which part of the season you're at.
But before we get to OITNB, I just want to sort of end on this parting thought about Jenji Kohan, and you can tell me whether you agree or disagree. I feel like women like Shonda Rhimes and Amy Palladino, women who've written these beautiful shows about other women, about the character, whether it's a Gilmore Girls where you've got a mother and daughter, or now a Marvelous Mrs. Maisel where again the protagonist is a stand-up back in the period setting, or Shonda Rhimes who really brought strong black female characters to the center. I feel like that's the space that even Jenji Kohan has sort of created for herself. Of course, in a very different way, because she brings more of a mix of culture. Her cultural representation and different cultural representation seems to be really important to her. But I feel like...
But I think, interestingly, what you said, a show like Orange is the New Black would have really, really helped the process of getting a show like Marvellous Mrs. Maisel made. In the sense that, I'm not saying that there is a direct connection, and in turn a Marvellous Mrs. Maisel sort of rubs off on a scenario where a Glow comes out. You know what I'm saying? Like one show about great female protagonists kind of rubs off on another. It's almost like when a great crime show comes out or a legal procedural comes out, and then it rubs off and you get a better version of that.
It's what women actresses across the world have been saying, right? Even in mainstream film industries, that until you don't give such films a chance where the entire cast is female, or the female-led film and doesn't make money, how will you know? Like, at least try it, right?
Yeah. All right then. So we'll be talking about Orange is the New Black on the other side of this break.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another awesome week on the IVM Podcast Network. If you are not following us on social media, please make sure you do. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And also, just a reminder, if you like what you're listening to, take a screenshot of what you're listening to and tag us on social media, and we will repost your post. Also, please do tell a friend if you're enjoying a podcast which you think a friend would enjoy. Do tell them. I think that is something that really helps us. I think that we do see, increases in listenerships when you guys do that. So please do tell friends that you are enjoying what podcast you're listening to. Last week, we launched a new show called Agla Station Adulthood with best friends Ritasha Rathod and Ayushi Amin. They talk about their journey into adulthood. On the first episode, they discuss crushes and female friendships. And on this week's episode, they try to crack the code on how to adult. You can also catch Ritasha and Ayushi on This Week Cyrus Says, where they talk to Cyrus about the podcast, what constitutes acting like a grown-up, and Ritasha gives Cyrus detailed instructions to reach Mud Island. Know Your Kanun with Amber Rana is back with a new season. On the first episode of Season 2, Amber is joined by model Hasleen Kaur and actor Laura Mishra to talk about civic issues. On the Empowering series, host Zarina Poonawala is joined by investment banker Neetu El Singhani, who shares her experience of being a single mother. On 9XM Soundcast, host Eva Bhatt is joined by Aditi Singh Sharma. Aditi shares interesting stories about her childhood in Russia and Dehradun and singing for a rock band in Delhi. This week on Golgappa, Tripti Khamkar is joined by Priya Bapat, an actor par excellence who shares some incredible stories about self-love and prioritizing oneself. This week on the Pragati podcast, Sandesh Anand joins Pawan Srinath to talk about cybersecurity. On Advertising is Dead, Varun is joined by CEO and co-founder of Terribly Tiny Tales, Anuj Gosalia. They discuss the emergence of short-form content. On The Habit Coach, Ashlyn Doctor talks about acupressure, acupuncture techniques, and their benefits. On Pulyabazi, Pranay and Saurabh discuss the political history, present, and future of Balochistan with former RAW officer Tilak Devashar. This week on Paperback, Satyajit and Racheta talk to Sanchita Lohot about books that bring forth an individual's hardships. And with that, let's get you on with your show.
All right, then we're talking about Orange is the New Black. And just to give a quick rundown on people who have not yet watched the show. So the first season of Orange is the New Black began with this character called Piper, played by Taylor Schilling, who essentially gets involved in a shady drug deal and gets imprisoned and then enters the prison system. And it essentially tells a story from her gaze of this woman who enters a world that she's completely far removed from, and enters a prison where she encounters criminals of varying degrees. And obviously she then encounters the entire gang culture that has been started by, say, the African American community or the Hispanic community. There's an entire group of Russians who've gotten together, and she's just this, simple suburban girl who did one stupid thing in her life and then got caught in the midst. But what's great about the show is that as the show sort of unfolds over a period of time, the gaze of Taylor sort of, starts becoming a less important thing, and the show turns into a more ensemble piece with all its various characters and their perspectives coming through beautifully. And it's really a story about these various different women with such interesting backstories about why they became criminals, or what they did, that one thing that they did wrong in their lives, which landed them in prison, and what their lives have become now.
I feel like Orange is the New Black's biggest victory over 7 seasons has been the fact that, when you see these women in the first season, you automatically assume everything that you do about people you see as criminals, right? You think that they're bad, you think that they've done some terrible things. And fair enough, some of these women have actually done some terrible things in their lives. But over 7 seasons, at least the main 8 to 10 characters who you're following, you realize that there is a human element there as well. And by human, I mean that not everything is black and white. Just because a person has murdered somebody doesn't mean that they're necessarily all bad.
Among other things.
Yeah, or just because someone has, gotten caught in the prison system by mistake or for a very small crime doesn't mean that they're all good. They could have been bad people to begin with. I mean, let me talk about some of the characters that, I think, Ani, you and I have loved. One of the most standout characters for me across season, of course, is Red. And that, particularly because of the way she looks, right?
Kate Mulgrew plays Red.
So Red is Russian. She has flaming red lipstick on all through the first few seasons. She's got red hair, and she's sort of the mama bee. She's the queen bee who runs the kitchen. She's the mama who takes care of the drug addict. She takes care of her kids. She's really gone into prison. She's a lifer, and she's realized that, okay, I've got to make my time here. I've got to survive this life one way or another. So she takes over running the kitchen.
And the kitchen, as we see,
over multiple seasons,
is the most influential place in a prison. I mean, the women who run the kitchen sort of call the shots for several reasons. Firstly, because, food is such an integral part of everybody's daily lifestyles. But more importantly, they use a lot of the ingredients coming in and out to sort of smuggle things in and out, and contraband, which they then run to sort of control the prison system, right?
Correct. So
I remember, in fact, there was an entire passage in between where the entire Russian gang was squaring up against a group of Latin American women who both of which, so there was one gang led by Red, the other one led by Gloria, and they both fought to take control of the kitchen. And of course, if you watch the show, you'd realize over a period of time how even their relationship, like in season 7, Red and Gloria's relationship is like the most heartwarming thing about the show.
They started off really being each other's competitors, giving each other a tough time, using every trick in the book to get the other down, and then they end up, of course, as allies towards the end of the show.
Yeah, which happens with a lot of the characters.
The thing about, if you're starting Orange is the New Black right now, all I'm going to say is don't make any assumptions about any of the characters, because one of the things the makers have done beautifully is that they themselves create the stereotype. They put the stereotype in your head, and then within about 2 or 3 seasons, they've broken that stereotype completely.
But that's because Piper's stereotypes are all being blown away.
Correct.
So the stereotypes we see earlier are from Piper's perspective, which is why they exist in the first place.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, so there's, of course, Red, who we talked about. Then there is your favorite character.
Which is?
Natasha.
Oh, Natasha Lyonne. There's more than one favorite character
I don't know,
have. I love Natasha as an actor, and I loved her in Russian Doll.
Yeah.
If that's what you mean.
What is Natasha's character's name? Why am I blanking right now?
Natasha, she plays Nikki.
Nikki, who's
the
most, the happiest druggie in the world.
The happiest druggie and the horniest lesbian in the entire prison system.
Yeah. Then of course there's Looney Lorna. I mean, Lorna's track, usko kya kara hai.
So Nikki, Lorna and Red, to give audiences perspective, are a sort of a group.
Yeah,
they
they're
function
one group.
together.
And they're almost like Red's kids in a sense.
Yeah.
Then there's Alex, who's Piper's love interest across 7 seasons.
Played by Laura Prepon from That 70s Show.
Yay, That 70s Show's kids. We all grew up on that show. Anyway.
So I have to talk about Alex. You just continue giving out the list of characters because we have to talk about I'll just say it. How weird was it to see Alex being played by Prepon, because we had only seen her in that 70s Show Avatar.
And I feel like even in That 70s Show, she always was the one who was so nonchalant. She was cooler than the rest of the group. Yeah, but
she was very unlikable on that show.
Yeah, because she is the one who's too cool for school. People who are too cool for school are rarely liked, Aniruddha.
So I thought...
Are rarely liked.
No, I thought she was... Oh, you're referring to me, is it? Oh, so I am supposed to be... Okay, fine, I'll take that.
I like you. It's okay. I married you also.
But anyway, that's all. You're my Piper, basically.
Oh, dear.
Because, spoiler alert, Piper and Alex are in love with each other.
Yeah.
But essentially...
Alex is also the reason Piper's in prison in the first place.
Listen, you're taking this too slowly. I'll give out all the character names really quickly. So there's Alex, of course, played by Laura Prepon, and Alex and Taylor have this amazing relationship, and I love them. There is Tasty, who is this really crazy, happy character who's like the most positive person in the entire prison system.
She's also educated, intelligent, and someone who's not, again, the stereotypes that you associate with her is, oh, she's from the hood, how much will she know? But you'll see over later seasons, she's actually bloody freaking brilliant.
Yeah.
Then there's, of course, Suzanne, who throughout 7 seasons has many mental health issues, and yet none of those are impediments for what the kind of person and the kind of positivity she radiates. In fact, she has grown to be one of my favorite characters because she's just like a big warm hug of love.
So Suzanne, basically played by Uzo Aduba, is the breakout star of the show. In the first couple of seasons, Uzo Aduba basically swept the Emmys, winning the Best Supporting Actress.
There's also Laverne Cox at that time. First ever transgender actor woman who was also nominated for an Emmy.
Yeah, but Laverne Cox did not continue to be part of the show. But there was this very interesting, again in that same interview, I read about the fact that there was this whole analysis of the show, which is that there was some critics who spoke about how Jenji Kohan, who's herself basically a white woman, did not really realize the importance of the African American characters when she was sketching them out herself, because the gaze was that of a white woman. So when she was locking down actors for the show, the only actors who were supposed to be coming back for season 2 were all white. Whether it was Taylor Schilling herself, whether it was Laura Prepon, whether it was Kate Mulgrew who played Red. These were the main actors. Your Uzo Adubas and the Tasties of the world, Daniel Brooks, were all actors who had been signed on for a 1-season arc. But then their popularity blew up in such a way, and especially Uzo Aduba with her win at the Emmys, made the entire writer's room relook the show. So now when you think about it, if you go back to season 1 and season 2, you'll realize that these guys don't probably have as great an arc as, say, they started having season 3 onwards, which is when we started loving the show, right?
Then that's such a great story, right? That's a great story about a group of writers who've also realized that, hey, the audience is changing.
Yeah.
And it's no longer just like, oh, we don't want to see just white faces narrating the story of these people. We want to see them tell their own story, right?
Yeah.
It's a great story of evolution over there. But one of the other things that blew my mind is when I saw Uzo Aduba at the Emmy red carpet, right? You see her on the show, and Suzanne is sometimes difficult to watch because the way they present her. And yet, that is one of the best things I love about Orange is the New Black, that the characters aren't afraid to be as ugly as they possibly can on camera.
It's very real. They keep it very real.
It's so
in fact,
real.
The first season is very tough to watch for that reason.
Because critics were blown and people who were writing about the show were blown, because even shows that were based in prison up to that point, it felt like they had some access to some secret makeup within those prison walls. But in Orange is the New Black, literally nothing is fake. There are no fake.
No, and in the first season, because also, again, coming back to Taylor, because Taylor was suddenly being faced with slightly disgusting situations for the first time, whether it's cleaning the toilets or whether it's cleaning the washrooms or whether it's coming across characters who are extremely crass or who do dirty things, so to speak. I mean, we were also being a little grossed out by those things initially, right?
Yeah. Now, of course, nothing grosses us out.
No, and also because I feel that the show got slightly sanitized over a period of time. And I think that's got to do not with production design or anything. It's got more to do with the state of mind of the characters. You know, when you get used to a certain situation, that thing starts seeming less odd to you and normal.
But, you know, also the universe is really important, right? In the first season, because you've shown us that this is the kind of prison I'm going to show you, then later on everything else sort of, you don't need to keep showing me that to tell me about
correct.
what
Also,
kind
you
of
know
space
what
we're
the
in.
prison space is, so you don't need to necessarily show those things.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what really according to me, makes Orange is the New Black work is that, like you said earlier, they have been able to break all the stereotypes in such a wonderful fashion. And at the end of the day, as with most great TV shows that get stuck in your mind, the thing about Orange is the New Black is the characters. And each of those characters are full, you know, it started as a one-woman show, then it turned into a 3-character show, and then now it's a full-blown ensemble.
Yeah.
And every character works. In fact, what they've done across different seasons is that apart from the main actors, which is a large cast in itself, which has got like a show-long arc, right? Which do actors who have stayed through the show, like the ones that we mentioned. There were actors who basically got just a season-long arc. But even in those cases, they were, you know, they managed to make all those arcs work, make those characters work, whether it was a Judy King, whether it was some of the earlier, sort of prison guards who went, Piscatella, for example, who was this asshole prison guard who we hated. But they kept changing even when they got rid of one old villain and got a new one in, that villain became extremely menacing or somebody who we got invested in quickly.
Yeah.
And that's a testament to how beautifully they fleshed out all these characters. Like, I know Tasty, right? I know a Red. I mean, it's almost like I know these characters so well that you can do anything with them and it becomes convincing because they've so beautifully been fleshed out. The other thing is that because these characters were so well fleshed out, we as audiences were able to see them for beyond see them for the people that they really are. We could look beyond their crimes or all the horrible things that they may have committed outside prison to have ended up there. And even those who did terrible things during the lifetime of the show in prison, even some of those characters we've been able to, sort of forgive and fall in love with later on, as it happens in real life, which is that people do good and bad things. You hold it against them for a while or you forgive them. But, at the end of the day, you can relate to them. And I think it's that emotion, that human emotion that they've been able to draw out in the characters, which really makes Orange is the New Black work.
It's the same thing, right? I mean, they say time is the best healer, and they're showing that these women have now spent that much time with each other over 7 seasons.
Yeah.
Which means that, the people who were your enemies in the first... It's like school sometimes, yaar. Matlab, first standard mein jo tera dost nahi tha, it doesn't mean ki wo 10th standard mein jaake tera dost nahi ho sakta.
Correct.
Irrespective of what kind of an asshole that kid might have been in the first grade. It's just that kind of an analogy. But, also beyond that, like, I love some of the themes. I mean, for my favorite seasons, for example, is a Riot season.
Yeah.
Also because the character that both, again, you and I love, another really positive African-American character, Pusey Washington, which was actually based on it was a very controversial, by the way, killing.
Yeah. So Pusey is based on the real life killing, right?
But not on just one. I mean, there have been theories about how it was based on multiple killings of sort of, African-American men, and sort of how Jenji Kohan and her writers adapted it into the writing of OITNB. And that season... because until then, all of these characters that we were looking at them in different kind of groups, right? But then comes Pusey Washington's death.
Right.
And the inmates' revolt.
Right. No, but so essentially what essentially happens is at the end...
What essentially happens is... do you think Aniruddha uses way too much essentially? Write to us on Twitter.
So after the first couple of episodes, when Janice and I heard the episodes and I realized that I was saying essentially way too many times, I've cut down on the number of times I essentially say essentially.
Hassan Minhaj has a board in his office because he also apparently, everyone has these problems, by the way.
We say sort of all the time, but which you've stopped saying now.
I say I used to say but I'm saying he also has a board of words that he says way too often, and then he looks at it and he's like, ye mere script mein nahi aayega.
So right now, these are the things that I say essentially and sort of. Janice says I feel and sort of, but but essentially,
coming back to Posey Washington,
essentially what happens at the end of season 4 is that there is this scuffle between a guard and the character of Posey Washington. Now Posey Washington is this character who's extremely affable, right? And this is something OITNB does really well, is that it suddenly shifts focus to one character in a new season and you don't know why. But then somehow at the end of the season, it just completely makes sense.
That trope only worked once, because after that, whenever they spent way too much on time on a character, we're like, is character ke saath kuch na kuch to
why? I mean, Uzo Aduba, when they spent a lot of time on Suzanne in season 1 and 2, they gave us that payoff in the end where we realized that she was a misunderstood character. So she started off, Uzo Aduba's character started off as the stalker who was in love with Taylor.
Stalker,
and she was creepy, but then by the end of it, we realized that she was actually just misunderstood and had mental health issues.
And that Taylor was the asshole.
Piper, you mean?
Piper, yeah.
Yeah.
Taylor Schilling.
Taylor Schilling plays Piper. But see, the thing about Posey was that in that season, they made us fall in love with the character of Posey because she was this ball of sunlight and most amazing person.
Yeah, she was this person who was into athletics. She ran the library in the prison. She was in love with a new inmate who had just sort of joined the prison.
So there was an entire love affair that we got to see blossom during season 4.
Correct.
So we were really invested in those characters, and at the end of season 4, which is in the penultimate episode, last scene, there is a scuffle that takes place, and this result of which Posey dies in an accident. So a guard basically trying to pin her to the ground essentially puts a thigh or a knee over her neck and ends up asphyxiating her without intending to. But that results in massive chaos. Also because it's important about who dies.
Yeah.
Because Posey was somebody, even her enemies loved her, right? She was just a character who was very difficult to dislike.
She was universally liked in the prison.
So that led to what you are talking about, which is the prison riots.
It's not just that, because also besides Posey's death, by that point in the show, you're also sort of seeing the amount of, like, you would think that within a prison system, it's the criminals who you must dislike. But Orange is the New Black teaches us it's actually the corrupt system that runs these prisons and the guards who have absolutely, I mean, some of these guards are shown as
but there are good and bad.
Evil, cold.
Yeah, so they've shown the guards to wield power, which seems a little... So also because you have to understand that we are with our sentiments are with the prisoners. So we see the guards as villains. But within the guards also there are good guys and bad guys, just like there are good guys and bad guys among the prisoners. But what they did in season 5, which was an extremely bold thing, by the way, it didn't go down with a lot of critics, but you and I loved. I absolutely loved. It's my favorite season of Orange is the New Black, which is that in season 5, they essentially took an entire prison riot, which on another show would have been a 1 episode or a 2 episode arc, and turned it into an entire season. Essentially what happens is that the prisoners take charge of the prison and basically keep all the guards and all the staff hostage. And they played out an entire season out of that. It was the most interesting season ever. The lights are going out, the water
There's fire.
And it's like they are all just, like they're literally and figuratively dousing one fire after the other.
And of course, that's also the season I think all of us or at least Ani and I genuinely sort of fell in love with Tasty, because until that point you liked Tasty. She was a cool character, but it's in season 5, in the prison season, when she sort of takes over as the leader of this riot, as the spokesperson rather of the riot, that you realize that, she's capable of so much more. In the real world scenario, she would be like the leader of a movement. So this is the same situation, except it's in prison.
Yeah, and also for the first time we saw in terms of cast of characters, the season 5 list of characters was the highest, because there was so much happening during the riot at different points of time. So there was the white supremacist that we spoke about on the Billion show, where we spoke about how Asia Kate Dillon played one of those guys. There was the guys who were addicted to drugs. Then there was the guys who were the
Hispanic group.
All of them, and it was basically things going nuts, and how all these people find a semblance of sanity in all that chaos. And it just gave us so many great moments. And for the first time, I think, on the show, we saw people from different groups starting to work with each other.
To bandy together, yeah.
I think that's the story of Orange is the New Black, is the story of life, which is that in the first 2 seasons, it plays out like a classic prison drama where there are gangs and they're fighting with each other. But season 3 onwards, it's like all of them realize they're in the same problem and they need to work with each other.
And the impact of season 5 is felt even in the finale season, because a lot of your characters are still sort of paying the price for their roles in the riot. And by season 7, which is now the finale, the final season, the goodbye season, it's like there are no real gangs anymore. Everyone's sort of, in one sense or another, because they've been sent to multiple prisons, they've been broken up, the groups have been broken up. Everyone is now friends with each other. Whoever's from the old prison, it's like you're a group now.
Yeah.
Which is also typically, again, school analogy. Wohi tha. Alag-alag gang se ek milke, now we've all become friends.
Yeah. Yeah, but which is amazing.
You know, the thing is that in season 7, in the last season, the makers could have chosen a very easy way out, which is just to sort of wrap up all the storylines of your main characters in a very neat fashion. But I feel like what's again so brave and commendable is that despite the fact that they knew that they've got so many characters to tie up and finish off and, you know, tell us what happens with them, they still made the effort to tell us some new storylines.
Yeah, but also you can't do that. In a show as such, which does not have a definitive storyline, it's not like because the show ends, that prison system comes to an end, right? So a lot of these characters, some of them are let out, some of them die in the process, some of them make their peace with the fact that, you know, they have to lead the rest of their lives in prison. But there is really no way to end the show, because if you think about it, if with the great characters that they've created and the fact that they are still in the prison system, you could have easily had spun off like 5 more seasons if you wanted to.
Yeah.
But what you've done is you've just decided to end the show. You're giving a sort of a closure to a few characters, but you can't give a closure to everyone, right? Because their lives in prison continues even after the, in the universe.
I was focusing more on the fact that they had a mighty task at hand, right? To at least as many characters as they could do justice to in terms of a goodbye, they did it. In addition to that, they also brought out new storylines. I mean,
but
the new season
that's where the 13
talks
season arc, 13 episode arc comes in.
Yeah, so this is, by the way, so Orange is the New Black was commissioned at a time when Netflix had just started commissioning originals, and of course at that time, like we've talked about in the Marvel and Netflix's deal, all the episodes had to have a 13 season
Check
arc.
out our Marvel Netflix episode where Janice and I have at length discussed the pluses and minuses of having a 13 episode arc as opposed to an 8 or 10 episode arc.
Yeah. So I'm saying that over here, of course, that it came to it's to their benefit that they've have 13 episodes and they managed to do so much, because actually,
and they did 7 seasons of 13 episodes. And
what
it
is
never
13 sevens, sir?
13 sevens are 91.
Very good. See, this is why math not my strong point.
But it never ever lagged. It's amazing. It didn't lag from the 3rd season onwards. And you know, every great show has a point where it peaks. And it's amazing that it peaked at the midway mark, which is with Pusey's death at the end of season 4. And then it's like the prison riots just completely took it in a different, tangent altogether.
5, 6, 7, boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, and 5, 6, 7 essentially are all related to each other. It's almost like if the show had begun with the beginning of episode 5 and ended with the last episode of 7, it would have still made sense, because it's almost like the effects of everything that happens in 5 are continuing in 6 and 7. But before we wrap up our conversation about Orange is the New Black, and it's of course a show that Janice and I are absolutely in love with.
Highly recommend.
I consider it to be a modern TV classic, because there are TV shows which, are great for a couple of seasons. They peak, then sometimes they lag. Orange is the New Black is one season that if you invest time in, if you, are a little patient in the first couple of seasons, the payoffs are massive. And it's amazing that it has managed to stay on top of their game through 7 seasons, and they have always managed to reflect real world issues. In season 7, for example, like you said, there are new topics being dealt with. Jenji Kohan and her team of writers have gone into the whole ICE phenomenon, with the fact that immigrants are being sent off back home. In fact, there's this heartbreaking scene of kids, in court being sent off without any legal help, which is obviously, again reflecting Trump's America. But Orange is the New Black, 7 seasons. If you've never watched it, all 7 seasons on Netflix, you've got to start watching right now. If you watched it and you stopped watching it midway because you felt that the show was hitting some sort of a, wall, it does get better. Seasons 4, 5, 6, 7 are fantastic. And if you sort of got bored in the Prison Riot season, which happened with a lot of people I know, 6 and 7 are absolutely terrific seasons. This is a great show. If you've never watched it, go out there, see it. My only advice would be to be patient and give it some time because it takes a while to get off the mark, but once it does, it flies.
My only advice is don't be stupid, watch it.
On the other side, we'll be talking about another Jenji Kohan show. This one she's executive produced and it's called Glow.
Hello everyone, welcome to Tech Careers in the new podcast series presented by Accenture. I'm your host Shiladitya Mukhopadhyay. In this podcast series, we'll get you the latest and greatest in the world of technology that's shaping the future of business as we know it. We're talking intelligent platforms, cloud, AI, blockchain, extended reality, and a whole lot more. Every fortnight on Wednesdays, we'll have for you a hot topic with expert speakers from Accenture talking about top trends in the space, how these are changing the world and creating growth across industries. And importantly, we'll tell you how you can learn more, build your skills and expertise to grow and stay relevant in your career. Episodes out on the IVM Podcast app or wherever you get your podcast from.
Welcome back. You're still listening to Mr. and Mrs. Binge-Watch, and the show we're going to talk about now is Glow. This one has Jenji Kohan as executive producer, and it basically has Alison Brie play the lead. She plays Ruth on the show, who in season 1 in 1985, yes, it's a period show. She is a struggling actress. She has no work. She has no prospects, and she's also just slept with her best friend's husband.
Correct.
Who's a big soap opera actor. And so she's got no...
Actor.
She's got no prospects. She sees an audition call for a wrestling show. And because she's so desperate, she actually goes and auditions. Once she does the audition, she realizes, oh, okay, my God, this is almost like a freak show because none of us are doing anything usual. None of us look pretty cool or pretty. All of us, in fact, look pretty much like what would have been described back in the day as freaks.
But what's amazing is that Ruth's approach to acting is so freaking serious.
Yeah, method.
That even when she gets into wrestling, the beauty of the arc of the first season is that there's this filmmaker called Sam Sylvia, played by the amazing Mac Maron, and he's this, sort of filmmaker of exploitative films, which have done like B Grade Cinema, which has done really well. He has his own cult following, and he's this guy who's over the edge now, over the hill now. He doesn't give a about filmmaking or telling stories or any of that. He just wants to make money, and that's why he's shooting these wrestling videos which are going to be watched by audiences, like cheap audiences, because they'll get
because in the 80s they were like, acha chalo mardon se
because
kara
they'll get
liya
off
humne.
on like watching like semi-clad women getting into catfights with each other. But what Ruth does is that she enters and she says, hey, why not give these guys certain backstories? And they're like, what the f*** are you all talking about? And give them characters. And it's essentially it's beautiful to watch Glow, because if you grew up in the 90s watching WWF like I did and are ashamed of it right now like I am. I mean,
because it was a very exploitative
because we believed
industry.
it. No, because we believed it.
No one believed it.
I was a kid then, Janice. I believed everything.
You thought Undertaker came to last life 5 times.
Not 5 times. I
4
just
times.
thought that he came back from the death and that Paul Bearer was really holding his ashes in that little flask.
What?
Yeah, and my dad made fun of me for it.
And you thought Stone Cold Steve Austin was the coolest man
No,
in the world.
then by the time
Stone Cold Steve Austin
Janice, by
was
the time
coolest
Austin
man in
and
the
Rock
world.
came in, clearly your knowledge of WWE is really low. By the time these guys came in,
my brother and I would watch, because one of the main WWE wrestlers
Janice,
at that
how
time was
are you an
WWF.
interviewer? I don't understand.
WWF ka main wrestler at that time was Shawn Michaels, and of course my brother's name was also Shawn, so we were like, we must watch this shit.
Yeah, you're just blowing my mind right now. All right.
Is that what I'm blowing?
There was mid-90s and there was mid-2000s. What you're talking about with Austin and Rock was much later. I was grown up then and I knew that this was all shit, that I've been watching shit for 10 years and I'll continue to do it. But when I first started watching it, like early 90s, you're talking about Hulk Hogan, you're talking about Undertaker, Hitman Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels.
Hitman Hart was my favorite.
Hitman Bret Hart.
Bret Hitman Hart.
Okay, fine. Bret Hitman Hart. Also,
You had
another
those
way to say
WWE
it.
cards, kya?
Yes.
And who would you always like? I would never give away Bret Hitman Hart.
You
Like,
can't not give away. If you
but
lose,
you know what I
give away
mean,
the
na?
trump
Like,
card.
I would be like, if I
No,
won
you'd
that.
always want either Hulk Hogan
'Cause
because he
number
was
one.
rank 1
Yeah.
or Undertaker because highest height. So
Yeah.
nobody could beat his 7'1".
Kya game tha wo?
Or if you got one of those guys who I don't remember right now, but chest size was 56.
No, but that
No,
other
that's
guy who
Narendra
was
Modi,
really tall,
sorry.
who was the giant? Andre the Giant?
Yeah, but he was low.
Oh my
it was
god!
lesser than
But
Undertaker.
I got like such cool points so that I remember Andre
You
the Giant.
totally missed my Narendra Modi 56-inch joke.
What?
In between. But anyway, so Glow made me realize that the whole aspect of storytelling really works in wrestling because we never watched wrestling for the actual fights. They got over in 2.5, 3 minutes. It used to be that build-up.
Pre-drama, post-drama.
Especially with The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin with their entire enmity, the show would always begin with them getting in the ring and using lines at each other. And that's how The Rock got famous because of the lines that he came up with, which was not something that was very common among a lot of wrestlers at that point of time. And then it would always lead up to that final fight, and then they would also script that in such a way that a third person intervenes, and so that's
Someone thrown a chair
so
in.
that's what Glow shows, that it's not enough to just, and that's what Ruth brings to the table, much to the annoyance of Sam Silvio, who just wants to shoot a fucking show and go home.
And to her best friend whose husband she has slept with, played by Betty Gilpin. So Betty Gilpin plays Liberty Bell.
Yeah. So, and what Ruth does is that she takes on the character, and this is another amazing twist, which is that she herself takes on the role of the villain because Betty Gilpin is this big soap opera star and she has to play the main lead.
So she's the American Liberty Bell. She's here to save all of you from all the bad things in the world.
Yes.
She's the female superhero in a WWE costume with lots of cleavage.
Yes, and because this is the 80s, of course, the villain had to be Russian. So she plays Zoya the Destroyer. And I just love Alison Brie. I've always loved her. In that small role that she played in Mad Men, she was just so freaking amazing. I love her voice acting on BoJack Horseman. And she's just the cutest, most adorable thing ever. And she's such a great actor, and you see that, and I'm almost surprised that Alison Brie does not get nominated for Best Actor at the Emmys year after year.
We can debate that in our Emmy specials, which, by the way, guys, our next 3 weeks are going to be dedicated to Emmy specials, and all of these conversations Ani and I will have over there. But coming back to Glow, in season 1 and season 2, like we were talking about Orange is the New Black, because they're doing the setup, because they're telling us again, they're creating this new universe of ragtags in a WWE setup who are being filmed for a TV show. And they're struggling to get their TV show off the ground. They're struggling to find a producer. They're struggling to find a network. There's a lot of struggle in season 1 and season 2. But I think in season 3, when they're sort of, the red carpet has been rolled out for them to come to Vegas, that's where the show, I feel like, is now begun to fly.
Yeah.
And let me tell you why. Because I feel like in season 1 and 2, they were still establishing characters. They were still establishing the skit for the show. What will the Glow show look like? Now, the characters know that their show is popular. They know that they're financially stable. They know that they've got people backing them. So now they've actually, in season 3, given time to each of the girls to have their own tracks. So there's, a lesbian relationship. There's Ruth, who seems to be, in love with someone, but also dealing with a strange sense of loneliness and melancholy. There's Debbie's character, who's dealing with being this guilty mom, having to fly back between, Vegas and where her child is. So I'm saying there are lots of, and of course, the best arc of the show is for Sheila, the she-wolf.
Yeah. No, I think every great show, I always say, is judge a great show by its second season, because a lot of shows have great first seasons and then they either just completely go for a toss or they get even better, and if they land that
Sacred
second
Game. Sorry.
You meant of shows that don't land. All right. So shows that land in season 2 are the ones that really fly, and Glow, I felt, after having a good season 1, really became something else in season 2, and we were like, wow, what is this show? And these characters are just coming out so nicely now. So when that happened last year, is the fruits of which are being sort of born now in season 3, and I think it's going to continue to happen over at least 2 more seasons, because now the show, like you said, it's just flying. Every scene, every character, the humor is flowing. It's so damn funny. It was always a funny show, but right now it's almost like the jokes are flying. While the jokes are flying, they're also managing to make the characters interesting. They're managing to give them interesting arcs. Again, the reason we decided to, sort of talk about both Orange is the New Black and Glow on the same show is that apart from having the Jenji Kohan connect, it's also two shows which has a large female ensemble, and there's so many different characters. And to be able to do that sort of, balancing act and ensure that all their tracks come out, all their arcs work, requires such craft. And I think it's never happened before better on the show, on Glow itself, than it has in season 3.
Again, here also what they've done is that they've created these, like all the girls themselves have decided to create these very racial characters. Each of them,
it's storytelling basically.
Yeah, so if you're Asian, you're playing a character that's got every kind of stereotype, from arriving on stage in a fortune cookie to talking in a strange accent. Same with the Russian, same with the American, same with every other damn character. And then you realize that behind the scenes, though, how they're anything like their culture, but also so proud of their culture. So they're almost sort of, it's this very like strange, ironic conflict which the makers do so beautifully.
Yeah,
and I have to say, and of course I will not say this off the recording, is that Aniruddha always gets these things right. I didn't want to watch Glow in season 1. In fact, we watched the first 5 or 6 episodes of the show together and I got totally bored. And Ani kept saying, no, finish the first season.
Same thing happened with Orange is the New Black, by the way.
Same thing also happened with Dear White People. Ani has had to convince me to finish certain seasons just so that we could watch future seasons of that show together. And chances are 90% of the time he's been right.
Which means I know
because,
better.
Currently, guys, I'm watching Bosch, a show I have resisted watching for 4 seasons.
But Aniruddha has forced her into doing.
You've not forced me. I just realized suddenly I'm like,
I'm waiting for season 5 and you're slugging through season 1.
I'm not slugging through season 1. I'm finishing season 1.
This is the third time you started and restarted season 1 of Bosch. What are you talking about?
On a totally different tangent. Coming back to Glow.
Please do.
I'm going back.
I have to talk about it? I'll do it. Not a problem. I'm saying that, there's this beautiful moment in season 3 where all the girls, when they get a day off from work, they sort of go off into the mountains. And there is this thing about colleagues, right? And it's a very interesting dynamic, which is that you work with certain number of people and then you either get close to them or you don't, or you get close to 1 or 2 people. What Glow does in season 3 is that all those dynamics between the characters that they were building in season 1 and 2, here's where you get the payoff. Because in season 3, this specific episode where they all go off into the mountains and you see their bonhomie for the first time.
Yeah.
And for the first time, they open up to each other emotionally. And there's this extremely emotional, sort of heartbreaking moment where one of the girls talk about how she was basically, her family were Jews running from Nazis.
And then the Asian character opens
And then
up.
the Asian character opens up about her, family's backstory. And it's almost like they are these guys who've known each other for months, but not really known each other. And then there is this period of realization that, wow, there's so much more to the person I'm working with than just what we see on the surface. And, a sort of a dam breaks loose, right? Because right after that, we know now that these characters are just so much emotionally dependent on each other, and the humor flows even better. And I think now they've ended season 3 on a fantastic note, on a sort of a cliffhanger. They've also built up on a relationship between Ruth and Sam, which seemed very unlikely in season 1.
It still seems very unlikely to me.
I don't agree, because now I'm completely bought into it. I really want them to get together because their scenes this season are just magic. It's been an extremely entertaining season. It's ended on a high note, and it's also ended on a note which sort of opens up possibilities for the story to go in different places in future seasons. So Glow season 3 is definitely a show you should start watching if you watched the first 2 seasons. It's just dropped a couple of weeks ago and it's an extremely breezy watch.
Yeah, it's not as intense as an Orange is the New Black, which will take a little bit more emotion out of you. But Glow is actually a lot more easy breezy in comparison.
Yeah, and it's 8 episodes, 30 minutes each, so that's a good, and 10 episodes, so that's about a 5-hour watch.
Sunday ko subah se sham tak you can finish one
season. Yeah,
it's
and if you've never watched Glow or maybe watched the first season, just like Orange is the New Black, if you get past the first season, there is a massive payoff in place.
There's also great music on Glow. So that's another big
reason to watch. There's great music on all the shows that we've discussed. Weeds, Little Boxes became such a popular thing that I think in one of the later episodes, Jenji Kohan got different bands to play a cover version of the same title theme in each episode of the show. So there were different title different song playing in the titles, different versions of the same song playing. Orange is the New Black, the opening number.
Oh my God, You've Got Time is one of the best opening title tracks of all time. And in the finale season, in the last episode, the way they do it is beautifully. Also in the finale...
Also, we cried in the finale.
Yeah. Also, I feel like they've used the best music for the last season. I mean, I don't think I ever noticed the music so much in Orange is the New Black.
And Orange is
last
the New
season,
Black
killer music
also has this amazing skill that they'll use the best music in the last scene and they'll just end on a high.
Yeah.
So even when the episode feels like it's lagging, they just bring it together at the end of every episode. And like you said, Glow again has a great opening title theme and it's got like great songs, great music. All right then, Orange is the New Black, 7 seasons out there. Easy binge watch. Go ahead and do it. And if you haven't yet, there's 3 seasons of Glow. Easy breezy watch. If you haven't started watching that, go ahead and do that. Weeds, I don't know if it's available in India, but it's an old show. And if there are Weeds fans out there, I feel you guys. So that's it from us. And stay tuned in the month of September because Janice and I are going to be we are essentially going to be dedicating the month of September to what else but the Emmys 2019. Look out for our picks of the best actors and best actresses and supporting actors and supporting actresses in both
shows
drama and comedy
limited
categories. And we're going to do an entire episode where we pick our favorite shows in the best drama and best comedy category. There's a lot of Emmy action coming your way.
And if you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com. You can also now follow us on our social media handles. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. And of course, Guha and I are at Ani Guha and at Janisek85 on Instagram and Twitter. Emmy specials coming up for the next 3 weeks. Stay tuned.
Hi, I'm Satyajit.
Hi, I'm Racheta.
We are from the Open Library Project and we host a podcast called Paperback.
Paperback is a podcast where we engage with stalwarts and experts from various industries, suggesting non-fiction titles that contributed to their journey in a big way.
We've had guests like Anjali Raina, Dr. Marcus Rani, Dr. Swati Lodha, Ambi Parmeswaran, Apurva Damani, and many more on our show Paperback. Find new episodes every Wednesday on IVM Podcast app, website, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Filter coffee is a fascinating beverage. You need to pick the right beans, blend them in the right proportion, roast them to perfection, and slow brew at the right temperature to get the perfect cup. Which is exactly like great conversations as well. You need to track down the most interesting minds, get them into their zone, and settle down for an unhurried, unscripted chat. And coffee for me is always, always, always best enjoyed with friends. I'm Karthik Nagarajan, and do share my table as I meet some of the most interesting people I know and sit them down for a strong cup of coffee and an even stronger conversation. Join me every Wednesday for a freshly brewed episode. This is not frappe. This is the Filter Coffee Podcast.